No one's ever kissed me, the peasant girl confessed, and the prince said, May I be first? The church bell tolls. Hooves thunder through the palace gates. In a garden where she never belonged, a poor seamstress stumbles into the path of a royal heir. One slip of her tongue sparks a forbidden promise, one that could set fire to the throne itself, but in a world where one kiss could ruin a kingdom. Duty is a weapon sharper than any sword. The prince is already promised to another, and the court watches every move with merciless eyes. When her secret is dragged into the light, the girl is cast out in shame, yet fate is not finished with her. A fire in the market square, a life saved, a choice that could change the realm forever. Will love strong enough to defy bloodline survive the weight of a crown? Or will the kiss that started it all become her undoing? Comment below and tell me where in the world you're joining from. And if this story made you pause for a moment, hit that subscribe button for more Dawn. Painted the sky in gentle strokes of pink and gold as Annalise hurried along the cobblestone path to Whittlesbrunn Palace. Her woven basket, filled with freshly mended silk garments, bounced softly against her hip. The morning air held a crisp sweetness, and dew sparkled on the manicured hedges surrounding the grand estate got at the servants' entrance. Annalise presented her credentials to the guard, who nodded curtly. A young page, no more than 12 years old, scurried up to her. You're the seamstress, he asked, his voice cracking. This way, miss. The housekeeper wants these delivered through the garden entrance today. Annalise hesitated. The garden entrance? But I always knew orders, the page interrupted, already turning away. Follow me. The boy led her down an unfamiliar path, lined with perfectly trimmed rose bushes. Their fragrance filled the morning air, making Annalise's head swim slightly. When they reached a fork in the path, the page pointed vaguely to the right. Just through there, he said, then disappeared back the way they had come. Annalise stood uncertain, clutching her basket tighter. The path curved ahead, disappearing behind a high hedge. The sound of a fountain splashed in the distance. She took a deep breath and walked forward. As she rounded the corner, she collided with something solid, or rather, someone. Strong hands steadied her shoulders as she stumbled backward. Her basket tumbled, spilling its precious contents onto the gravel path. Oh, she gasped, dropping to her knees to gather the garments. I beg your pardon. Please, allow me to help, said a gentle male voice. Annalise looked up into the kindest brown eyes she had ever seen. Her heart stopped. Prince Friedrich himself knelt beside her, gathering scattered silk into his arms. Your Highness. She scrambled to bow, nearly losing her balance again. I should not be here. A page directed me wrongly, and peace, the prince said softly, helping her to her feet. His hands were warm through the thin fabric of her sleeves. No harm done. Annalise's mind went blank with panic. The prince stood so close she could smell the subtle scent of his cologne. His eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and something in that gentle expression made her feel suddenly terribly alone. That is, she stammered. Then to her horror, blurted out, no one's ever kissed me. Mortification flooded her cheeks with heat. But instead of mockery, she saw something tender flash in the prince's eyes. May I be first? He asked quietly, before Annalise could process his words. Voices and footsteps approached from around the hedge. The prince's expression changed in an instant, becoming carefully composed. Double quotes, your highness, called a richly dressed courtier, leading a small group around the corner. We've been searching for you. Friedrich stepped forward smoothly. Perfect timing. Allow me to introduce our newest addition to the palace staff. This talented young woman will be joining as seamstress to my sister, the princess. I was just reviewing her credentials. Annalise stood frozen, clutching her basket, as the prince produced a piece of paper from his coat and quickly marked it with his seal. Your trial position begins tomorrow, he said formally, though his eyes held a spark of warmth as he handed her the document. Report to the housekeeper at dawn. That evening, Annalise sat beside her father's chair in their modest home. The single candle cast dancing shadows on the wall as she showed him the official paper, its red wax seal gleaming in the dim light. Palace employment? Her father wheezed, his eyes brightening despite his illness. My clever girl. How did you manage such a thing? Annalise touched the seal gently, remembering kind brown eyes and an unspoken question that made her heart flutter. A stroke of luck, father, she said softly. And perhaps a touch of destiny. Her father squeezed her hand weakly. The Lord provides, he whispered, though his ways are mysterious indeed. Annalise smiled and tucked the precious document away, her mind already turning to tomorrow's dawn and what it might bring. The morning sun streamed through tall palace windows as Annalise followed Frau Gertrude up the narrow servants' staircase to the seamstry. The room smelled of lavender and beeswax, with neat rows of spools and ribbons arranged on wooden shelves. Your workstation is here, Frau Gertrude said, gesturing to a small table near the window. Her stern face softened slightly as she added, the light is best for detailed work. Annalise settled onto the wooden stool, arranging her sewing basket with trembling fingers. 3 other seamstresses glanced up briefly before returning to their work. The whisper of thread through fabric the only sound in the room. Days passed in a gentle rhythm of needle and thread. Annelise's skilled fingers worked wonders with delicate lace, repairing tears so fine they were nearly invisible. Her careful stitches caught the attention of the head seamstress, who began entrusting her with more elaborate pieces. Such precision, Frau Gertrude remarked one afternoon, examining a repaired chemise. We haven't seen work like this in years. The other seamstress's initial coolness warmed to cautious acceptance as Annalise shared her techniques for invisible mending. She kept her head down and worked diligently, determined to prove worthy of her position. Twice that week, Prince Friedrich passed through the seamstry on palace business. Each time, he paused to thank her properly, Frau Gertrude hovering nearby like a watchful hawk. Your repairs are most appreciated. Mistress Bauer, he said with careful formality, though his eyes held a warmth that made her cheeks flush. You honor me. Your Highness, she replied softly, dropping into a proper curtsy as she'd been taught. In the evening quiet of her tiny loft room, Annalise wrote to her father by candlelight. Her quill scratched across the rough paper as she described her new life. Dearest father, the palace pays fair wages, enough for proper medicine at last. I pray you will accept the coins I've enclosed and visit the apothecary for your cough. The work is steady, and Frau Gertrude, though strict, is kind in her way. Please take care of yourself until I can visit on Sunday next. She sealed the letter with a drop of wax, careful not to let her tears fall on the paper. The palace messenger had agreed to deliver it with the morning post in exchange for her, mending his worn jacket cuffs. 3 days later, a response arrived, delivered by the same messenger who now wore notably neat cuffs. Alone in her loft as evening bells tolled across the palace grounds, Annelise's fingers trembled as she broke the seal. Her father's familiar shaky handwriting filled the single page. He wrote of using the money for medicine, of feeling stronger already, of his pride in her position at the palace. But between the lines, she read his loneliness, his worry for her future. Kneeling beside her narrow bed, Annalise clasped her hands in prayer. The last rays of sunset painted the wooden beams above her in soft gold, as she whispered, Dear Lord, grant me strength to care for father, wisdom to work well, and she hesitated, remembering kind blue eyes and a gentle smile, and guidance to know my proper place. Her father's letter crinkled softly in her apron pocket as she rose. Through her small window, she could see the palace gardens where she had first stumbled into the prince. How different her life had become in such a short time. The weight of her new responsibilities pressed upon her heart. Yet somehow she felt lighter than she had in years. A cool evening breeze carried the scent of roses from the garden below. Annalise smoothed her apron and lit her bedside candle, ready to practice her stitches for another hour before sleep. She would need steady hands and a clear mind for tomorrow's work. Her father's future depended on it. Dawn's first light painted the palace chapel in hues of gold and amber. Annalise arranged fresh white lilies at the altar. The familiar scent of Burning candles and polished wood brought comfort as she worked, her fingers gentle with the delicate petals. Sunday mornings had always been precious to her, but serving in the palace chapel filled her heart with special joy. "The brass needs more polish," Frau Ribber, the head housekeeper, called from the vestibule. "His Majesty's mother will attend today's Latar Mass." Anneliese nodded, reaching for the cloth and brass polish. As she worked, the metal candlesticks began to gleam like mirrors. The chapel slowly filled with other servants preparing for the service, lighting candles, sweeping the stone floors, and arranging prayer books in the noble family's private pew. The bells began to toll, their deep voices echoing across the palace grounds. Soon the chapel filled with rustling silks and quiet whispers as the court assembled. Anneliese kept her eyes lowered as she slipped into place among the servants, but her heart quickened when Prince Friedrich entered with his mother, the Queen Mother's voice rang out before the service began. "My dear friends," she announced, her tone carrying easily through the hushed chapel. "On this joyous Latar Sunday, I have wonderful news." She paused, her smile proud as she gazed at the assembled nobility. "It is my great pleasure to announce the betrothal of my beloved son, Prince Friedrich, to the most noble Lady Isolde von Marburg." A wave of delighted murmurs swept through the chapel. Anneliese's hands trembled in her lap. She forced them still. Lady Isolde rose from her family's pew, curtsying deeply to the Queen Mother as applause filled the sacred space. Anneliese didn't dare look up, focusing instead on the worn edges of her prayer book. The leather binding blurred as tears threatened, but she blinked them away. What right had she, a mere seamstress, to feel such pain? She had always known this day would come. The Mass proceeded with all its familiar comfort, the priest's Latin chants, the smell of incense, the faithful responses of the congregation. Anneliese let the ancient rituals wash over her, seeking peace in their unchanging certainty as the congregation filed out afterward. Prince Friedrich passed near where she stood. "Miss Bauer," he said softly, his voice meant only for her ears. "Keep faith." His eyes held a shadow of some deeper meaning. But he moved on before she could respond. Lady Isolde swept past moments later, her cream-colored silk rustling importantly. Anneliese caught a glimpse of the lady satisfied. Smile and proud bearing, everything a future princess should be. The rest of the day passed in a blur of needle and thread as Anneliese threw herself into her work. When darkness finally fell, she climbed the narrow stairs to her small chamber in the servants' wing. A single candle cast dancing shadows on the whitewashed walls as she sat on her narrow bed. Her fingers found the cross her father had given her at her confirmation, worn smooth by years of prayers. "I must think only of duty now," she whispered to herself, though her heart felt heavy as lead. "Father needs the wages from this position. I cannot risk it with foolish dreams." She moved to the window, looking out at the stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky. The same stars shone over her father's cottage, over the grand chambers where Prince Friedrich slept, over Lady Isolde's estate. They were constant, unchanging, like duty, like faith, like the proper order of things. Anneliese squared her shoulders and turned from the window. She would continue her work, serve with dignity, and guard her heart's secret. There was honor in such service, even if it came with pain. Tomorrow would bring more gowns to mend, more tasks to complete, more reasons to keep her eyes lowered and her thoughts firmly fixed, on duty rather than dreams. She blew out the candle and lay down, her pillow dampening with silent tears despite her resolution. In the darkness, she allowed herself this one moment of weakness before. Tomorrow would require her strength again. The morning sun streamed through tall windows as Anneliese joined the princess and her ladies in the blue salon. Scattered about on delicate chairs, they worked on clothing for orphan children. The cheerful chatter of noble ladies mixed with the quiet snip of scissors and rustle of fabric. "Miss Bauer, your tiny stitches are remarkable," the princess said, examining a small coat Anneliese had finished. "The children will be warm and proud in such fine work." Anneliese blushed at the praise. "Thank you, Your Highness. My father taught me that even the simplest garment deserves care." The door opened, and Prince Friedrich entered with several books in his arms. Behind him, Lady Isolde swept in like a storm cloud in purple silk. Brother, how fortunate. We need someone tall to reach the pattern books on the highest shelf. The princess called out. Friedrich's eyes met Annelise's for a brief moment before he bowed. I am at your service, dear sister. As he crossed to the library alcove, Lady Isolde settled herself near the window, her sharp gaze following his every move. Annelise kept her head down, focusing on her needle's steady rhythm through wool cloth. Miss Bauer, would you assist me? Friedrich's voice was perfectly proper. These volumes are quite dusty. Under the watchful eyes of the princess's companions, Annelise rose and approached the alcove. Friedrich stood by the ladder, holding several leather-bound books. Your kindness to the orphans does you credit, he said softly as she reached for a volume. I've seen how the children treasure your work. 'Tis only simple sewing. Your Highness, and Annelise's fingers trembled slightly as they brushed his while taking the book. Nothing. It's simple about bringing comfort to others. His gentle tone made her heart flutter. You have a gift for it. From across the room, Lady Isolde's voice cut through their quiet exchange. My dear Friedrich, pray tell me which volumes you found so fascinating. I long to share your intellectual pursuits. Friedrich's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Merely old pattern books, my lady. Nothing to interest you, I'm sure. Isolde rose in a whisper of expensive fabric. On the contrary, I find everything about you interests me deeply. She glided closer, her smile sharp as a needle's point. Annelise quickly stepped back, clutching the pattern book to her chest. Thank you for your help. Your Highness? She dipped into a curtsy and returned to her seat as the afternoon wore on. She felt Lady Isolde's calculating stares. The noblewoman's fingers drummed impatiently on her embroidery hoop while Friedrich lingered near the bookshelves, occasionally glancing toward the sewing circle. When the light began to fade, the princess dismissed her ladies, all except Annelise. Stay a moment, if you please. Once they were alone, the princess spoke gently. You have a good heart, Miss Bauer. I see it in your careful work, your kindness to others. She paused. And in how you look at my brother. Annelise's cheeks burned. Your Highness, no explanations needed, dear girl. But I must warn you, guard your heart carefully. Friedrich's path is set by duty and tradition. Lady Isolde watches like a hawk, and she is not known for mercy to those who threaten her ambitions. Tears pricked at Annelise's eyes. But she blinked them back. I understand, Your Highness. I know my place. The princess touched her hand softly. Sometimes the kindest hearts bear the heaviest burdens. Take care. Later that night, Annelise sat alone in her tiny chamber in the servants' wing, listening to rain patter against the window. By candlelight, she stitched carefully on a small boy's jacket, each precise movement of her needle a comfort against the ache in her heart. Friedrich's gentle words echoed in her memory, warming her despite the damp chill. Yet Lady Isolde's calculating gaze and the princess's warning cast shadows over her hopes. The steady rhythm of her needle through fabric anchored her, as her thoughts swirled like autumn leaves in a storm. Thunder rumbled in the distance as she worked, the sound matching the tumult in her heart. Still, her stitches remained small and even, each one a quiet act of love, for the orphan child who would wear this coat, for her ailing father waiting at home, and for a dream she dared not name even in the privacy of her own heart. The spring masquerade transformed the palace, ballroom into a shimmering dreamscape. Hundreds of beeswax candles cast their golden light upon the polished marble floors, while paper lanterns swayed gently in the evening breeze from the open terrace doors. Silk-clad figures twirled and spun, their faces hidden behind elaborate masks of feathers, jewels, and painted designs. Annelise pressed herself against a column, grateful for the simple half-mask that concealed her identity. Her gown was the plainest in the room, borrowed from the princess's charity chest and hastily altered to fit. Still, its dove-gray silk caught the light beautifully, making her feel, for just one evening, like she belonged among the glittering nobility, a mysterious dove among peacocks, a familiar voice murmured beside her. Would you honor me with a dance? Her heart leaped as she turned to find Prince Friedrich. handsome in midnight blue velvet, his face partially concealed behind a golden mask. She dipped into a curtsy, trembling slightly. Your Highness, I should not. Tonight, we are all merely dancers, he said softly, extending his hand. No titles, no ranks, just souls moving to the music. The orchestra began a gentle waltz. Before she could protest further, Friedrich led her onto the floor. His hand at her waist was warm and steady, and as they began to move, Anneliese forgot everything except the music and his eyes behind the mask. You dance beautifully, he whispered, guiding her through a turn. My father taught me in our kitchen, she admitted, using a broom for practice. His quiet laugh warmed her heart. That humble broom taught you better than many dancing masters I know. They moved together, as if they had danced 1,000 times before. Anneliese was aware of other couples around them, of the rustle of silk and murmur of voices, but it all seemed distant, dreamlike. In this moment, protected by their masks, they were simply a man and woman sharing something precious and fleeting. As the music drew to a close, Friedrich's hand tightened slightly at her waist. Walk with me, he murmured. Please, she knew she should refuse. But the magic of the evening, the warmth in his voice, and her own yearning heart betrayed her better judgment. She allowed him to lead her toward the terrace, where paper lanterns swayed like stars brought down to earth. In a quiet corner, partially hidden by potted orange trees, Friedrich turned to face her. The lantern light played across his mask, making the gold leaf shimmer. With gentle fingers, he lifted her chin. Since that morning in the garden, he said softly, I have thought of nothing but that innocent confession of yours. That no one had ever kissed you. Anneliese's breath caught in her throat. Your Highness, Friedrich, we must not. His voice was tender. Or should not. There is a world of difference between the two. Before she could respond, he lowered his head and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was soft, sweet, and achingly gentle. Anneliese's heart soared even as tears pricked behind her closed eyes. This one perfect moment would have to last for a lifetime. Neither noticed the shadow that slipped away from behind a nearby column. Ulrich, Lady Isolde's maid, her dark eyes gleaming with malicious triumph as she hurried through the servants' corridors. The kiss ended far too soon. Friedrich stepped back, though his hand still cradled her face. I should not have done that, he whispered. But I cannot bring myself to regret it. I must go, Anneliese managed to say, her voice barely audible. She turned and fled, her slippers silent on the marble floors as she made her way back to the servants' quarters in her tiny room beneath the eaves. Anneliese sank onto her narrow pallet. Her fingers touched her lips, still tingling from Friedrich's kiss, as tears slid beneath her mask. She had no way of knowing that, at that very moment, Ulrich was whispering poison into Lady Isolde's ear, her words falling like drops of acid on the noblewoman's pride. The Sunday court gathering buzzed with its usual symphony of rustling silk and murmured conversations. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, catching the jewels that adorned the necks and fingers of the assembled nobility. Anneliese stood quietly among the other servants near the wall, her hands folded demurely before her plain dark dress. Lady Isolde's voice cut through the gentle hum like a blade. Your Highness, I must speak of a matter most urgent. She stepped forward, her emerald gown whispering across the marble floor. Every head turned toward her commanding presence. The Queen Mother inclined her head. Speak, Lady von Marburg. There's a serpent in our midst, Isolde's. Words dripped with venom as she pointed directly at Anneliese. This common seamstress has been making advances toward Prince Friedrich. At the masquerade, she dared to kiss him, corrupting his honor with her low-born charms. Gasps rippled through the assembly. Anneliese felt the blood drain from her face as dozens of eyes fixed upon her. Her legs trembled, but she forced herself to remain standing. She seeks to rise above her station through seduction, Isolde continued, her voice rising. Such behavior cannot be tolerated in a royal household. The princess stepped forward, her face tight with concern. Lady Isolde, you go too far. Anneliese has served this household with nothing but dedication and skill. Yet She cannot deny the kiss. Isolde pressed. Can you, girl? Anneliese's throat constricted. The truth burned on her tongue, but she could not speak it. To deny would be a lie. To confirm would doom them both. Friedrich moved to intervene, but his mother's sharp gesture stopped him. The Queen Mother's face was stern as marble as she addressed the room. This is indeed a serious matter. While we value loyalty in our servants, we cannot overlook such impropriety. To prevent further scandal, the girl must be dismissed from service immediately. Mother, Friedrich protested, but she silenced him with a look. Furthermore, the Queen Mother continued, to demonstrate our commitment to propriety, Prince Friedrich's betrothal to Lady Isolde will proceed as planned. The ceremony will take place within the month. Anneliese felt her world crumbling around her. The princess caught her eye with a look of helpless sympathy, but there was nothing to be done. With trembling fingers, Anneliese unpinned her servant's badge and placed it on a nearby table. You are dismissed, the Queen Mother said firmly. Return to your village before nightfall. Fighting back tears, Anneliese curtsied deeply. As she straightened, she caught one last glimpse of Friedrich's anguished face before turning to leave. The crowd parted before her like water, some averting their eyes, others staring with open disdain. The walk back to her father's cottage seemed endless. The familiar dirt path beneath her feet felt foreign now, the weight of her bundle pressing into her shoulders like a physical manifestation of her shame. The village children who once waved to her now ducked behind their mother's skirts as she passed. When she finally pushed open the cottage door, her father looked up from his chair by the hearth. One look at her face told him everything. My child, he said softly. Opening his arms, Anneliese fell into them, finally allowing her tears to flow. I tried to be good, she whispered. I tried to remember my place. Her father stroked her hair as he had when she was small. You have done nothing wrong but love purely, he assured her. Sometimes that is enough to frighten those who have forgotten how. The next morning, Anneliese rose before dawn, just as she had during her palace days. But now, instead of fine silks and laces, she took up the rough cloth of villagers' garments needing repair. The familiar rhythm of needle and thread brought some comfort, though each stitch seemed to pull at the raw edges of her heart. The village life she had once known resumed its steady pace around her. Women gathered at the well, children played in the dusty street, and the church bells marked the hours. Yet everything felt hollow now, as if the bright dream of her palace days had drained all color from her former life. Leaving only pale shadows behind, the morning sun cast long shadows across the market square as Anneliese made her way between the wooden stalls. Her basket of mended garments felt heavier than usual, though she knew it was her heart that bore the true weight. 3 days had passed since her dismissal from the palace, each hour marked by the quiet dignity she forced herself to maintain. Good morrow, Mistress Bauer, called the baker's wife, her kind smile a balm to Anneliese's wounded spirit. She had just handed over a repaired apron when shouts erupted from the far end of the square. Fire! Fire in the chandler's shop. Thick black smoke billowed from the wooden building where candles were made. The smell of burning wax filled the air as flames licked up the walls. People scattered in panic, their screams piercing the morning quiet. Then came a cry that froze Anneliese's blood. The children! They're trapped upstairs. Without thought for her own safety, Anneliese ran toward the burning building. Through the smoke, she could see small faces at the upper window, the chandler's apprentices, and among them, a finely dressed boy she recognized as young Master Wilhelm Warburg, Lady Isolde's beloved younger brother. This way, Anneliese called, coughing as she wrapped her shawl around her face. The back stairs were still intact, though flames crackled dangerously close. She rushed up, finding 5 children huddled in terror. Take my hand, she urged, gathering the smallest ones close. Wilhelm, help me with the little ones. We must move quickly. The young noble boy, his face streaked with soot, showed remarkable courage as he helped guide the younger children. They descended carefully, Anneliese shielding them with her own body as burning debris fell around them. Just as they reached the ground floor, a beam crashed behind them. Anneliese pushed the children ahead, ensuring Wilhelm was safely through before leaping clear herself. They emerged into the square as the building's upper floor collapsed in a shower of sparks. Young Master von Marburg, a palace courier who had been delivering messages in town, rushed forward, his official insignia glinting in the sunlight. "Are you hurt, sir?" Wilhelm, though shaken, stood straight as his station demanded. "I am well, thanks to this brave seamstress. She saved us all." The townspeople gathered around, offering blankets and water. Anneliese found herself surrounded by grateful parents and townfolk, their praise making her cheeks flush beneath the soot stains. "Such courage," the courier murmured, studying her with keen interest. "You are the same Mistress Bauer who served at court, are you not?" Anneliese nodded simply, focusing instead on checking the children for injuries. Young Wilhelm caught her hand, his grip firm despite his trembling. "My sister must know of this," he declared with all the authority his 12 years could muster. "You saved my life, Mistress Bauer. 'Tis only right she should know." The courier was already pulling out parchment and quill, recording the morning's events in detail. "Indeed, Your Grace, I shall deliver this news myself to Lady von Marburg and the court." As the excitement died down and bucket brigades contained the last of the flames, Anneliese felt exhaustion sweep over her. She knelt in the ruined square, her dress blackened with soot, her lungs still burning from the smoke. Yet deep inside, past the weariness and pain, she felt a quiet strength. The medieval square bore witness to the aftermath: scorched timbers, puddles of water, and the acrid scent of burned wax. But amid the destruction, Anneliese remained steadfast, her actions speaking louder than any words of defense she might have offered at court. The same hands that had sewn fine garments had now saved precious lives, proving that true nobility lay in deeds, not birth. Around her, the townspeople began the work of clearing debris, their murmured conversations full of praise for her bravery. The courier mounted his horse, the important message secure in his satchel, while young Wilhelm refused to leave her side until his guardian arrived to collect him. Through it all, Anneliese remained on her knees in the square, soot-stained but resolute, her quiet courage a testament to the strength of her character. The grand hall of Wittelsbrunn Palace buzzed with whispers as the queen mother sat frozen upon her carved throne, a letter trembling in her aged hands. The morning light streamed through tall windows, catching the gilt edges of her crown as she read the courier's urgent report for the third time. "Your Majesty." The messenger bowed low, his voice carrying across the marble floor. "All of Sankt Erhard speaks of nothing else." The seamstress showed extraordinary courage. She rushed into the burning merchant's house without thought for herself. Lady Isolde stood pale and silent near the dais, her usual proud bearing absent. Her fingers twisted in her silk skirts as she listened to the account of how Anneliese had saved her young brother, carrying him from the smoke-filled building moments before the roof collapsed. "She knew it was your brother, my lady," the courier continued, addressing Isolde directly. "The boy called out your name, and still she went to him. There you had—" His voice trailed off diplomatically. Prince Friedrich stepped forward from where he had been listening in the shadows. "Mother, surely this proves what I have long maintained about Anneliese's true character." The Queen Mother raised her hand for silence, her expression thoughtful. "Continue," she commanded the messenger. "The townspeople say she helped others, too. 3 children from the baker's family, an old woman who had fallen. When the fire was finally contained, she stayed to tend burns with herbs from her own garden." The courier's voice held unmistakable admiration. Lady Isolde moved suddenly, dropping into a deep curtsy before the throne. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I must speak. I was wrong about Anneliese Bauer. My pride and jealousy led me to judge her unfairly. She saved my dear brother without thought of how I had treated her." Tears sparkled in her eyes. Such nobility of spirit shames my own behavior. The Queen Mother's stern features softened slightly. Friedrich seized the moment, stepping forward to address his mother formally. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice carrying the weight of conviction. I petition to void my betrothal to Lady Isolde. He bowed deeply to both women. With respect to Lady Isolde's grace and acknowledging truth, this arrangement no longer serves either family's best interests. The hall fell silent. Even the courtiers ceased their whispers, watching the drama unfold. The queen mother studied her son's face intently. And what of duty, my son? What of tradition? True nobility lies in character, not birth, Friedrich answered firmly. Anneliese has demonstrated the highest qualities we claim to value: courage, compassion, selflessness. She brings honor to any station. The archbishop, who had been listening quietly, moved forward in his purple robes. Your Majesty, if I may? The Church recognizes virtue as divine blessing. In such cases, where God's will seems clear, we might offer either bans or special license. He folded his hands within his sleeves. Should your Majesty be so inclined? The Queen Mother rose slowly from her throne, her silk skirts rustling in the hushed hall. She walked to the nearest window, gazing out at the gardens where spring flowers nodded in the breeze. When she turned back, her face held a new resolve. Perhaps, she said carefully, it is time for the crown to demonstrate that we truly value the virtues we claim to uphold. She gestured to a waiting page. Send the royal carriage to fetch Mistress Bauer. She will be received at court with all courtesy. The page bowed and hurried away. Friedrich's face lit with joy, though he maintained proper dignity before the assembled courtiers. Lady Isolde offered him a small, genuine smile of blessing as servants rushed to prepare for Anneliese's arrival. The Queen Mother returned to her throne, her bearing regal but her eyes holding a hint of warmth. The morning sun streamed stronger through the windows now, touching everything with gold, like nature itself approving the triumph of true nobility over mere rank. The royal carriage, polished to gleaming perfection, rolled out through the palace gates, its gold trim catching the light as it began its journey to the village. Within the great hall, hope and anticipation filled the air like perfume, as even the most rigid traditionalists found themselves, moved by love's victory over pride. The carriage wheels crunched on gravel as it came to stop before Anneliese's modest cottage. Her father, looking frailer than ever, stood in the doorway, leaning on his cane. His weathered face lit up at the sight of the royal crest on the carriage door. Anneliese's hands shook as she read the formal summons. Father, she whispered, Prince Friedrich has petitioned to marry me. The Queen Mother requests my presence at court. Her father's eyes welled with tears as he took her trembling hands in his. My dearest child, you have shown more nobility in your little finger than many born to titles. Your mother would be so proud. He pulled her close, his voice thick with emotion. You have my blessing, sweet one. Love him well, as you have loved and cared for me. The journey back to Wittelsbrunn Palace passed in a blur of emotion. As the carriage rolled through familiar gates, Anneliese's heart thundered in her chest. Father Matthias waited at the chapel steps, his kind face beaming. My child, he said warmly, God's ways are mysterious indeed. Come, let us prepare for the reading of the banns. The following Sunday, silence fell over the packed chapel as Father Matthias's voice rang out clear and strong. I published the banns of marriage between His Royal Highness Prince Friedrich of Wittelsbrunn and Mistress Anneliese Bauer of Sankt Erhard. If any person knows cause or just impediment why these two persons should not be joined together in holy matrimony, ye are to declare it. The silence that followed fell holy. In the front pew, the Queen Mother sat straight-backed, her expression softened by something that looked remarkably like pride. Behind her, Lady Isolde lowered her eyes, her brother's small hand clasped tightly in hers. Word spread quickly through the kingdom of the prince who chose love over convention. Petitions flooded in from nobles and commoners alike, praising the match. The archbishop, moved by the outpouring of support and Friedrich's unwavering devotion, granted a special license to hasten the ceremony. When asked about her bridal gifts, Anneliese surprised the court by requesting not jewels or lands, but permission to establish a royal sewing school. Let other girls learn a trade, she said softly to Friedrich, so they might work with dignity and hope, as I once did. Friedrich's eyes shone with pride as he presented her proposal to the council. "My bride wishes her wedding gift to benefit the kingdom," he announced. What better way to honor her heart for service? The wedding day dawned clear and bright. Bells pealed across the city as common folk and nobles alike lined the streets. Inside the palace chapel, Annalise wore a gown she had helped design herself, simple yet elegant, with delicate lacework that spoke of both skill and humility. As she walked toward the altar on her father's arm, Annalise saw Friedrich's face transform with joy. Father Matthias spoke the ancient words with special tenderness, binding their hands with the ceremonial cloth. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder," he proclaimed, his voice carrying to the farthest corners of the chapel. Outside, the crowds pressed close as the newlyweds emerged into sunshine. Friedrich turned to Annalise, his eyes bright with love and certainty. Without hesitation, he drew her into his arms and kissed her deeply, properly. Before all their people, the cheers that erupted seemed to shake the very foundations of Wittelsbrunn. Rose petals rained down from the gallery windows as Friedrich and Annalise held each other close, their joy reflected in thousands of smiling faces below. "My love," Friedrich whispered against her hair, his voice carrying only to her ears. "You have taught us all what true nobility means." Annalise's heart soared as the crowds continued to cheer, their joy echoing across the palace grounds. In that moment, surrounded by celebration and held safe in her husband's arms, she knew that love had indeed conquered all. The morning sun streamed through the palace windows as Annalise rose early, her heart full of purpose. Though she now resided in the royal chambers, her first visit of the day was to the familiar warmth of the seamstress's workroom. The scent of fresh linen and beeswax brought tears to her eyes as she pushed open the heavy door. "Good morrow, my friends," she called softly. Frau Gertrude and the other seamstresses looked up from their work, faces brightening at the sight of their former companion. "Now, their princess, your highness," they began to curtsy, but Annalise shook her head. "Please, I am still Annalise here," she said, settling onto her old wooden stool. She picked up a piece of unfinished embroidery, her fingers finding comfort in the familiar motion of needle and thread. "Tell me of your families, your hopes for the sewing school." In the courtyard below, Lady Isolda's carriage was being loaded for departure. The proud noblewoman had found new purpose after her brother's rescue, announcing her intention to establish a hospital for the poor in St. Erhard. As Annalise watched from the window, Isolde paused to look up, offering a small but genuine smile. "Your example has taught me much about true service," Isolde had told her the day before. "Perhaps it is time for me to learn what nobility truly means." Friedrich had arranged for Joseph Bauer to be settled in a comfortable cottage near the palace gardens, complete with a kind-hearted nurse to tend to his needs. When Annalise visited that afternoon, she found her father contentedly reading by the window, color returning to his cheeks. "God has blessed us beyond measure, my child," Joseph said, squeezing her hand. "To see you happy and to know that others will benefit from your good heart is full." The royal sewing school opened its doors that very week, welcoming girls from all walks of life. Annalise insisted on teaching the first lesson herself, demonstrating simple stitches to eager young faces. "With these skills," she told them, "you carry hope in your hands." When Sunday arrived, Friedrich and Annalise attended chapel together, their presence bridging ancient divides. They knelt side by side on the same pew, noble and common folk following their example. After the service, they stayed to speak with every person who approached. From the highest-born lady to the humblest servant. As the sun began to set, Friedrich led Annalise to the palace terrace. The autumn air carried a slight chill, and he tenderly wrapped a warm cloak around her shoulders. Together they gazed out over the kingdom, their kingdom, watching golden light paint the distant mountains. "Out there," Friedrich said softly, pointing to where the spires of St. Erhard rose against the darkening sky. "Isolde's hospital will stand beside the market square where you saved those children. And there," he gestured to the palace courtyard, "your sewing school will teach generations of girls to work with dignity." Annalise leaned into his embrace, her heart overflowing. Who would have thought that morning in the garden would lead to this? She whispered, that love could bridge such distances. Love and mercy, Friedrich replied, turning to face her. He taught me that true nobility lies in how we treat others, not in accidents of birth. The last rays of sunlight gilded their faces as Friedrich drew her close. My brave, beautiful wife, he murmured. Thank you for teaching me to see with my heart. Their lips met in a tender kiss as the sun sank below the horizon, sealing, once again, the vows they had made, not just to each other, but to their people and their shared future. If today's story reminded you of the quiet strength of love, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow we'll meet right here where love speaks softly and stays.